Today, we will discuss and understand chapter number 4 in Indian economic development. The name of the chapter is Poverty. This chapter will enable us to understand the concept of poverty and various dimensions of poverty and its related concepts, and critical appreciation the way in which poverty is estimated, and to appreciate and be able to assess existing poverty alleviation programs in India. A small introduction about poverty would be: poverty is a widespread evil in the world, especially in Asia and African countries. It is the greatest challenge to mankind. In India, it is a strange paradox that on one side, millions of people who are not able to have their basic needs of life. On the other side, or on the other hand, a small chunk of people who have the best luxuries of life and live a happy life. Poverty is showing two things in Indian society. One, people with have and people without haves. So therefore, we will discuss what made the people to be poor and what makes them to become rich. At this point of time, I am reminded of the quotation of Mahatma Gandhi. Poverty is the worst form of violence. I like to give another motivational quote of poverty is from Bill Gates. If you are born poor, it's not your fault, but if you die poor, surely it is your own fault. If you are born poor, it's not your fault, but if you die like poor, it is your own grievous fault, great fault. That's what Bill Gates says, surely. So if we are poor, we will get motivated how and why we are poor and what are the measures we should take, and the government, how does it help to overcome poverty, will be understood by this lesson. So, ladies and gentlemen, we will have a keen understanding of this chapter from now onwards by concept. The first question is, what is poverty? Poverty is a situation in which a person or a group of people or a section of the people in the country are unable to get or not able to get their basic minimum needs like food, clothing, shelter. This basic needs, when the people cannot meet, that situation is called poverty. When group of people or individuals or a section of people who are unable to get their basic minimum needs. What is the basic minimum needs? Food, clothing, shelter. So remember, in India, millions of people are not able to meet their basic needs. Therefore, it is said that India is suffering from massive poverty. So, poverty in India has been defined as that situation in which an individual fails to earn income sufficient to buy him or her the basic or minimum means of subsistence. Minimum means of subsistence means basic minimum needs. Means the resources which give them living. Subsistence means living. There are two more definitions to explain the same poverty. Poverty explains an inability to fulfill the meager necessity. Meager means essential, basic, minimum. Meager means house, food, clothing, health facility, and education facility also today. Extreme poverty refers to complete lack of means of needs to be met, especially the basic food, shelter, clothing. At this point, I am reminded of another concept, that is extreme poverty, also called as absolute poverty. Another concept called relatively poor. Relatively poor or relative poverty is poverty in relation to the level of income. What does it mean? If a group of people in the country or a section of people in the country whose income is more than the other section of the people in the country. If you take two group of people in a country, one group of people income is more, in the other group of people income is less. So we compare them of having more, and those people having people less income are called as relatively poor. So that is a relative poverty measurement. Poverty in India has been defined as the situation in which an individual fails to earn income sufficient to buy him minimum basic subsistence. Subsistence means the basic minimum needs for living, like food, clothing, and shelter. From here, if you move on, why the poor are physically weak? Poor people are weak. What makes them poor is the first question I would like to tell you before discussing this question. What makes them poor as poor? Because the first one, the unemployment. The other one, the resources. First one, occupation or employment. The second one, the assets or the resources they possess. The poor people possess less resources, less assets, plus they do not have employment, or they do not have occupation, or they may have very, very less earning occupation. This makes them poor as poor. Okay, if you want to be poor, your occupation and assets are less, it means. Why the poor are physically weak? Because of malnutrition, means not having proper nutritious food is called as malnutrition. Hunger, not having food at all. Starvation, not having food for a longer time. All these leads to ill health, bad health. Ill health means bad health, which causes serious disabilities or illness. Illness means diseases, makes them poor, physically weak or ill. So if you eat like this, surely they are going to be very, very ill, or malnutrition, not having proper food. Define poverty line as per the Planning Commission. Planning Commission defines poverty based on minimum nutritional requirement. Minimum nutritional requirement. So this is measuring poor from non-poor. So the Planning Commission bifurcates poor from non-poor based on minimum nutritional calories required or requirement. So Planning Commission estimates the poverty line on the basis of minimum nutritional calories required for both rural India as well as urban India, or rural people or urban people. In rural people, the minimum calories of intake per person per day is estimated at 2,400 calories, whereas in an area it is 2,100 calories minimum calories of intake per person per day in urban area. So the main definition of Planning Commission of poverty line is based on basis of minimum nutritional requirement. Nutrition. So 2000 calories for a person per day in rural area and 2100 calories nutrition food intake per person per day in urban area. This is how the definition of poverty in accordance with Planning Commission. We will discuss the other definitions in the coming video, but presently this is sufficient. Poverty has many dimensions. Of course, it has various dimensions. How it has to be looked at? Poverty has multi-dimension. It has to be looked at various forms because the level of income of the people is less, the level of consumption is less, and their social indicators as well as indicators of vulnerability to risk and social political accessibility is also less. Therefore, the causes of poverty is multidimensional. They are poor not because of one reason, they are poor because of many reasons. They are denied of political rights, economic rights, and social rights also. They are undergoing various forms of risks and they do not get any institutional help from any parts of the society. This makes them poor as more poor. So poverty begetting in India because of many dimensions. The answer must be sufficient. So list the features of poor people in India. I have made few of them. First one, they do not possess any assets and they live in huts, and the poorest of the poor even do not have even huts, they live without huts. And second one, the poor suffers from malnutrition, hunger, starvation, which leads them to ill health, disability, and serious sicknesses, and which makes them physically ill and weak. The third one is chronic indebtedness. They are indulged in debts. So chronic means it is a unending story of debtedness. Indebtedness means backwardness. Why they are backward? Because their early generation is also not developed. Their generation and the next generation of their family will be always remaining in poverty. This is once you are poor, your family is poor, you tend to get exploited by the other members. So therefore, come out of poverty. You and your family will be saved. The next one, poor households have no access to electricity and their cooking will be on cow dung or firewood. They use dried cow dung cakes for burning their food or cooking their food, and as well as they use firewood if they have for cooking. They do not have any gas connections. The poor household do not have accessibility to safe drinking water as well as not even good sanitation facility. They do not have good water drinking and even for sanitation facility they do not. Evidence of extreme gender inequality in participation of gainful employment, education, decision making in the family. There are extreme gender inequality between male and female. Only male members are considered as better in their family and women are not even considered. Therefore, the health of the women are received less care during their motherhood. The mother and the child are left on the streets. How careless the health of the women in poor families. So, thus, to enable poor means it is enabling the women in India who are poor. Who are urban poor? So we are dividing the Indian poor into two parts, urban poor and rural poor, and how to identify them as urban poor and rural poor are discussed now. So the people who were rural poor have migrated to the towns in search of some employment. So it is overflow from rural poor to the urban poor. The urban poor are on overflow from the rural poor into urban area. So the poor people in rural area who did not find some employment or any work, they have moved on to urban areas in search of some work, or so that is overflowing from rural area to urban area. Many of them have migrated. Urban poor are being migrated from rural area in search of some alternative jobs. See, they live in these slums for some jobs. So they are pushcart vendors, street cobblers, pushcart vendors, you can see, and street cobblers. Okay, the women who string flowers means the stitch flowers and sell them. Rag pickers, beggars, street vendors selling varieties of things, and casual workers. And rag pickers are here on your right, and they beg for food, and so these are called as urban poor. And next one are rural poor. Who are rural poor? Give example. Because the rural poor are identified based on their occupation and ownership of assets in rural area. Their occupation is agricultural laborers, and as well as they own very less land or not even a land. First one, the landless agricultural laborers in India. Rural poor consist of landless agriculture poor, who are 60% of the poor population consist of landless agricultural laborers. They do not have land for cultivation, but they go for agriculture work. Second one, they have less land, very less land, and go for agriculture labor. That is agriculture labor households with less small holdings. They consist of 40%. The other one, non-agriculture rural labor households without land holdings. They are not agricultural laborers. They do not go for any agriculture work, but they live in rural area. They do not have even land. What are these people? They are ancient handicrafts, artisans, people those who are doing some craft work, especially weaving, pottery, carpentry. All these are traditional employments they are doing. They do not have land, neither they go for agricultural labor, but they live in rural area based on this. The fourth one would be, small land operators with cultivable land holding of less than an acre. These also. And other ones are tribal people who are poor, who constitute 18% of Indian population. Tribal people. They do not have any asset or occupation. They live in forest, and these are 18% of the Indian population who are really poor. The next point for discussion is, what is the social factors that trigger and perpetuate the poverty? Social factor, trigger. Trigger means improve or increase the poverty. Perpetuate means continue the poverty level. So what are the factors that are? First one, the factors that trigger and perpetuate poverty are illiteracy. If you want to be poor, or the poverty is continuing in the family because of the children are illiterates. Not only illiterates, the other factor is ill health. If the family members are ill health, that makes the expenditure of the family increase. And the third one is lack of access to resources. So once you do not have health and education, you cannot access to the resources. So once you do not have access to resources like a safe drinking water, good sanitation facility, you are discriminated from the society. So there is an extreme gender inequality among your families, and you do not find any gainful employment. You do not get more salary income. Your education of your future family also will be going downwards, and women are less cared, and less survival for the newborns, and health of the new child also will be declined, and lack of civil and political freedom. So all these things will make the poor more poor, Name the states which poverty is more than the national poverty level. States which has a poverty level is more than the national poverty level is Bihar, Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Odisha, Uttar Pradesh, West Bengal. All these states have poverty level more than the national poverty level. So the states which have more than the 40% of the population are above poverty. Nearly it is 40% of this. So governments or national poverty level above, their poverty is more. And the states which has a lower poverty level than the national poverty level is Andhra Pradesh, Gujarat, Rajasthan, Tamil Nadu. These states have poverty level is less than the national poverty level, that is 22% of national poverty, and these states have more than 22%, that is Bihar, Karnataka and Madhya Pradesh, that is a national poverty level is 22%. In these states, Bihar, Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra, Odisha, Uttar Pradesh and West Bengal has more than 22% of the national poverty. And Andhra Pradesh, Gujarat, Rajasthan, Tamil Nadu has less than 22% of national poverty level. So this is the question, this is the answer. Until then, take care of yourself. Have a nice day.